This week, someone asked me why Catholic churches have prominent crucifixes in them, like ours does here at the church. And I think our readings today for the feast of the Exaltation of the Holy Cross can give us something of an answer. So we heard in our first reading about the time when Moses and the Israelites had fled from Egypt and they were in the deserts, and because of their murmurings and their complaints, God allowed serpents to come and to bite them, and that some died. And God told Moses to make a brass serpent mounted on a pole so that whoever was bitten would look at it and be healed. And this, of course, wasn't magic. It was an act of faith and obedience to God. But it was still something very mysterious. What does this mean? And it remained mysterious until the coming of Jesus, because it was a prophetic sign. So in our gospel, Jesus says, "Just as Moses lifted up the serpent in the desert, so must the Son of Man be lifted up." And he was referring to his crucifixion, because through his death and resurrection, we have our salvation. And so Jesus is to be lifted up. And this is always the case, His sacrifice was once for all, so it wasn't just for 3 hours as he hung upon the cross. And so we can always look upon Jesus with the eyes of our mind, but it helps also that we have something physical to look at with the eyes of our body, so that we can enter into that mystery with faith and obedience to Him with our hearts. And so it's good that we have crucifixes in our churches, in our homes, in our classrooms, wherever we go, because it helps us to remember what Christ has done for us. It helps us to see the love that God has for us, that we should love Him in return, and that we should live for Him who died for us. And so this is a great method or a mode of, it's a great means of conversion in our life. So we always there's the first conversion of someone who comes to faith in Christ, but there's what we call the second conversion, which is a lifelong conversion. And we can look upon the cross, and this can help us to continue to change our lives. So one thing we can do perhaps is when we are getting ready to go to confession and we're making our examination of conscience, we could look upon a crucifix. We could hold it, or we could look at it on the wall and think about the love that Christ has for us. There's a story, I'm sure I've probably told it before, that happened shortly after World War II in Paris, France. There was a 13-year-old Jewish boy, and he had two of his Catholic friends, and they went into the Cathedral of Notre Dame. The priest was hearing confessions, so the Catholics dared the Jewish boy to go to confession and make things up. And so they kind of coached him through it. He went in, and apparently the priest was not buying it. He probably knew it was a prank. And so the priest told him, "When you leave, I want you to go across the cathedral to where there's a crucifix, there's a cross with a man nailed to it. And I want you to kneel down there and look upon his face, and I want you to whisper 10 times, 'I do not care what you did, what you suffered for me on that cross. I do not care what you suffered for me on that cross.'" And so the boy said that, and after the 7th time, he broke down in tears, and he realized the grace that God is giving to him, and he understood the Christian faith. And so it's a great means of conversion in our life, to look upon the cross of Christ. Okay, I want to share something else today too. So have you ever thought about what happened to the actual cross that Jesus hung upon? Right away, we don't know this for sure, but we assume that maybe the Christians, took it and put it in a special place. But shortly after that, the Romans destroyed Jerusalem and left nothing standing. And then they built things on top of that so that it would be hidden. And it wasn't until the year 315, when Christianity was legalized by Constantine, that his mother, St. Helena, who was a Christian, she went to the Holy Land in search of the relics of Christ. So this is 300 years after his crucifixion. and she's looking around. Once again, nobody knew exactly the place where these things were. But through excavations, they found supposedly 3 crosses. And the story differs a little bit. Some say that they found the title, which is that piece at the top that Pontius Pilate wrote, and that we have on most crucifixes. And that's how they knew that it was Christ's crucifix. Or there's another story that says there's a miracle that happened. Anyway, they had what they believed to be the cross of Christ. And so they split it up. One big piece went to Rome, one big piece went to Constantinople, and one piece stayed in Jerusalem. And then from there, little pieces spread throughout the world. And so much so that by the year 350, the bishop of Jerusalem said that the pieces of the cross are all over the world. And so those things were held on to as very important treasures of the church. Now there's a joke or like a saying that some people say, well, there's enough pieces of the cross to make Noah's Ark. And it's actually not true. Somebody studied it and said there's not even enough pieces to make a cross of what people call the Holy Cross. And so I wanted to show this to you today. I have this relic here. The priest in seminary gave it to me. It doesn't have any documentation with it like it normally should, but on the back of it, it has the seal of the Vatican. And so it's like 2 little pieces of wood. And so I believe that it is a piece of the cross of Christ. And so it's a special thing. We usually keep it down in the school, but for this feast I brought it out, and after Mass I'll put it here if you'd like to come up and take a look at it or touch it or whatever you'd like to do. So it's a very special thing. But wanted to say that even more special than anything like this is the Holy Eucharist, because this may be part of the cross of Christ, and yet the Eucharist is Christ himself, present among us, given to us as our nourishment. So, of course, we can venerate things like this, other relics, but the most important things that we have are given to us as a Eucharist and offered for our salvation. So it's a great day to celebrate the cross of Christ and to think about all that Jesus has done for us. Let us stand for our creed.